Great. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today for Tech Nation, and also for Albert to have already laid the groundwork for this Northeast Asia specific session today. So my name is Gordon Dudley, and I'm going to be talking specifically about talent acquisition in Korea for UK companies, a kind of hiring 101. So we've got about 15 minutes for this presentation. So I'm going to do my best to try to cover both the macro, kind of very high level type of information about Korea. Should you be at the very early stages and know literally nothing about Korea, and therefore maybe you can take away something about Korea for the first time, or if you are much more advanced in your current status and really considering Korea as a place to invest, to hire your first staff member and move into in the next 6 to 12 months, then we'll have some even more specific and very practical information for you as well. So let's jump right in. And really, I'm going to look at just 3 key areas. Why hire in Korea? So I think we might actually find some real similarities with Japan, but also some significant differences. Then we're going to look at what the talent landscape looks like. So if you're really thinking about moving into Korea, investing in Korea in the short mid term, how does it look like right now going into 2023? And then finally, coming from my 12 years of being based in Korea, in the last 6 years since I set up RDI, how to hire successfully. And we'll give some practical tips on maybe some of the key things to avoid, but also some of the things to understand more about Korea. So just very briefly, how is it that I'm here today to be speaking to you? So as introduced already at the start, I am the CEO and founder of RDI Worldwide, and we do talent attraction plus acquisition. And I put the emphasis on talent attraction because it is very much, as Albert has mentioned, in Japan, the same in Korea, a candidate-driven market. And especially as we try to attract younger talents, that also requires more of a what can we do for them as much as what they can do for us. And we also do team building and performance. So that's our local team here who are doing L&D, training, leadership programs to try and help teams, especially in multicultural teams, to work more effectively together. And so we are focusing on global companies who are coming into Korea for the first time, or who are established here but maybe lacking in HR infrastructure, and a lot of startups who are looking at Korea for the first time. We're also working with a lot of them. Happy to share some case studies with you. So if you're thinking destination Korea, then this could be a little bit of a nice overview for you. Koreans often like to say, there's a kind of famous saying in Korea that Korea is a shrimp caught between 2 whales, namely China and Japan, either side to the east and the west. And that is taken as something of a kind of pride that Korea, though small, actually is really rising up the ranks on the global scene, with its population of around 51 million currently, so a little bit less than UK, quite a bit less than Japan and China. But it does have a very high life expectancy, higher than the UK, and so that is also having some effects on how work and the demographics look. It's also a very, very highly educated market. As similar to what Albert has mentioned in Japan, we have in Korea a 76% graduation rate, so significantly higher levels of people going into tertiary education and having degrees and looking for sophisticated professional jobs. How does it look economically? So it's a $1.8 trillion GDP, and that is now 10th upon the most recent rankings, courtesy of some a decrease of Russia and Brazil, allowing Korea to rise into the top 10. In terms of GDP per capita, so it's about 34,000 US, comparison to UK at 41 as of last year. The good thing about trade is that even since Brexit has happened, that Korea and the UK were able to create a reflective FTA. And so even though coming out of that EU bloc, Korea and the UK do have an existing FTA. It is in the process of being renewed, and it currently stands at a total trade volume of £13 billion. So that is a lot of close relationship already economically between the two countries. In terms of ease of doing business, this is a ranking that comes out on a regular basis, produced by the World Bank. Korea actually ranks fifth, and if you take fifth as being fantastically high and relatively easy, then some of the things that is predicated on would be the cost and the speed. But that doesn't necessarily give the whole picture of how easy it is to do business in Korea. And perhaps setting up a business might be relatively easy, but whether you're successful or not could be another story. So that's just a quick snapshot about Korea from a kind of high level macro area. So what are some of the actual key factors that might make you think about investing into Korea and bringing your business to Korea? One of them is definitely speed. And in Korean, that is called bali bali. Bali bali literally just means hurry, hurry. And this is a real kind of core characteristic of Korea, because Korea is the country that has developed almost quicker than any other nation, famous for being the first country to go from aid recipient country to aid donor on the world aid side of things. And really what they call the miracle on the Han, the Han River that runs through central Seoul. It's really quite a phenomenal story of speed in which an entire nation has developed so quickly. And Seoul, where I am based right now, is in fact a true 24-hour city. I'm from the UK myself originally, and I definitely can promise you that even though claims of London being a 24-hour city, it does not compare to Seoul in that regard. And so if it means doing business across different hours, that's not going to be a problem. If it's a matter of getting services outside of regular business hours, that's also not a problem. One of the reasons that has kind of come about is that Korea has one of the second longest working hours in the OECD. Something that Korea is also kind of famous for, in a sense, is working incredibly long hours. And that's almost a sense of how things have been able to be achieved so quickly. It is something that's changing, and I think work-life balance is something that is coming in a bit more in Korea, more and more. But still, in terms of sheer number of hours worked, Korea is right up there. In terms of speed, of course, speed in many senses is a good thing, and startups particularly are always looking to move quickly. But speed also can be a negative thing, and especially when it comes to HR, we want to make sure that we make the right decisions. And so sometimes a perception of speed can be more effective than actually moving fast. And we'll get a bit more detail into that in some HR specific elements later. Another key area that would definitely make Korea attractive is definitely the technology side of things. Another area that Korea is incredibly famous for, an incredibly digitized consumer, a 96% smartphone penetration, one of the fastest internet speeds. And so the infrastructure technologically is really top notch. Incredibly large amounts of investment going in, and kept at a very modern level and standard, both in public transportation and investment side of things as well. What makes the technology so buoyant here in Korea is definitely partially predicated on the spend in R&D. That has seen Korea be ranked at the top of the Bloomberg Innovation Index in some recent years. And that's because the percent of the GDP going into R&D is at 4.81%, second only globally to Israel. So there's a very large R&D investment-oriented type of focus on that side of things as well. It would be remiss of me to introduce Korea and talk about Korea without also talking about the soft power of Korea, something that has brought Korea to the television screens and the mobile phones, and also the tables and restaurants around the world as Korea continues to get famous for some of these things here. Of course, K-pop has been around now for well over a decade. Psy being one of the front leaders of that, but now these days led by BTS. BTS itself has been credited with attributing $5 billion to the Korean economy, and also Blackpink. That's one of the bands, the girl groups that my daughter is a real big fan of, but they are also doing big things globally. Korean food, every time I go back to London, I see there is more and more Korean food in London of all kinds, not just kimchi, but more than that, the barbecue, bibimbap, and other dishes coming around the world as well. Of course, one of the areas that Korea has been leading, especially through the pandemic in the last couple of years, has been through its K-dramas and film. Of course, the award-winning Parasite, a fantastic film, and then more recently Squid Game from Netflix, which has, of course, been everybody's Halloween costume ever since that series came out. And Sky Castle, one of the most famous of K-dramas that has come out. And so that's doing, a kind of dual effect. I can see it is bringing Korea to the world, but it is also bringing the world to Korea. There's more of a global interest in what opportunities there are in Korea and around the world from Korea as well. Okay, so that could be just a very short summary of why you might like to hire in Korea and think about Korea as a destination. Let's now get into a bit more of the people side of things and what the talent landscape actually looks like. So Korea, like I mentioned, is a 51 million person country, and more than half of the population live in the Seoul greater area. So Seoul being the capital of Korea, and around 20 million plus live in the greater metropolitan area of Seoul. So that means it is incredibly important for the entire country. And really, when it comes to major top universities, the biggest companies, and all the centers of the society are very much in Seoul. That means that it can be difficult if you are located outside of Seoul, and we'll kind of talk about that in a bit more detail. But if you are in fact in manufacturing or some other industrial area, then they of course are not located in downtown Seoul. They are located to the southern regions. There is a cluster around Ulsan, which is where Hyundai Motors is located, of course, for automotive and steel. Busan, Korea's second largest city, which has shipbuilding and offshore located around it. But if we come to high tech and we're talking about e-commerce and startups, then really the cluster is Pangyo. And Pangyo is Korea's so-called Silicon Valley. It's located just to the south side of Seoul, about 30 minutes by subway. And so that is a kind of high-tech hub that is also growing very rapidly, and some of the famous names of the Korean tech scene are located there. But when it comes to English, and I think this was mentioned also by Albert, that whilst communication is one of the most important things, English is still, although it's well educated, Koreans have a lot of education in in English, still when it comes to speaking, it is lacking. And so there is a correlation we can see between age and ability. Younger people tend to be better at English. That allows them to communicate better with foreigners. But of course, we must remember that good English doesn't necessarily mean that they are right for the job. Somebody who just has good English skills does not mean that they are going to be your best partner. So beware of the person who's incredibly keen to suggest that they are your best partner. Be careful to vet them. There's generally a lack of spoken English, whereas actually reading and writing is pretty decent. So when we're talking about working together, emails shouldn't be a problem, but speaking and of course working together, that could be a whole different matter. So this does remain a significant barrier that we must be aware of when doing business in Korea. Korea also, in its fast development, has come from a very traditional and hierarchical society structure. You might be kind of surprised to hear that companies often come to me and they say, we're looking for somebody who's definitely male, They've got to be born between 74 and 78, and they should have graduated from Seoul National University. That's Korea's top university. So they're giving me these incredibly narrow and actual rather biased discriminatory criteria for the person that they want to hire. And that's in order that that person can fit into the hierarchy of their company. Although that is changing, it is still the base of Korean society. The older the person, the more conservative and traditional they are. And so working relationships have been traditionally based on age. And so you really have to manage expectations that somebody who is older will necessarily expect a higher title than somebody younger. And so that's something that we at RDI are really helping global companies moving into Korea to try to overcome and really find the most globalized talent who don't have so many holdups or, let's say, conservative restraints. But age can be your secret weapon. By that I mean, if you are not Korean, it's very difficult for people to know exactly how old you are. If you are incredibly senior yourself, then you can, of course, play that age card to your advantage. So there are some advantages to be able to using that to your benefit. Company image is also a very big thing in Korea. So I think when we approach to Koreans about their opportunity of working at a company, the first thing is it a famous company? Is it one that we have heard of? And of course, for startups, for small businesses, they're not going to be ready famous in Korea because they have a small presence. And so that really does, much as Albert mentioned, some of the big, most famous names have failed. Also, those who do not have that brand reputation also struggle to make a first footstep into Korea. And so that really is predicated on a perception of stability, a kind of risk aversion that a lot of Koreans have in that regard. And that's where key opinion leaders can be absolutely critical to your hiring process. That means being able to have the right senior, the people with the right kind of spec that they have on their experience to be able to verify and vouch for your business. And so that's why we also often advise advisors to be a part of your strategy when coming into Korea. Okay, so rapidly running out of time. So I want to just very quickly capture some of the important things about hiring in Korea. You might have heard this before, that people do business with people, not companies. And I think that is just 10 times more important in Korea, where relationship basis is so important. Maybe we can talk more about that in the Q&A. In terms of the mobility of the labor force, just to kind of give you a high-level overview there, definitely Korea is more emphasized on permanent contracts. So that makes it difficult for companies coming into Korea to say, oh, we want to offer you a 6-month contract and see how it goes. That's not going to work in Korea. And so instead, the permanent contract, the full-time contract is really needed to be able to show that that level of investment commitment to Korea is there in order to make that first step successful. I did want to show a little bit of the cultural difference, but maybe we've run out of time and we can maybe come back to that in the Q&A. So let me just wrap up there and give a quick checklist of things that you might want to look out for. Building relationships is absolutely key. Also accepting that socializing is a big part of doing business here in Korea. That can be outside of regular working hours. Work to Korean timelines. So fast deadlines, but slow partnerships. And technical entry can help success. That means making it clear that you are here, not just as a short-term investor, but for the long term to do business. And some of the tools that you might need are some of the things which you might not have heard of. So Naver is the Google of Korea. It's Korea's largest search engine. Job Planet is Korea's version of Glassdoor. KakaoTalk is Korea's WhatsApp. Blind is a global app, but is used very heavily here to give information about companies. But then right in the center there is your trusted advisor. And I think that's the key point, is that you need a trusted advisor on the ground to help you navigate this rather tricky and unique market. So with all that being said, a self-evaluation of where you think you might be, ready or not, on a scale of 1 to 10. Have a think about that, and happy to get into some more questions now in the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gordon.